Welcome. This is Uncommon Sense, a podcast presented by the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center. The center is an initiative of the CPA Education Foundation, the charitable arm of the Chartered Professional Accountant profession in Alberta. Our episodes feature conversations with Alberta CPAs sharing their insights on a wide range of timely topics. Alberta CPAs work in every part of the economy and volunteer their time and expertise in virtually every community in Alberta. With each episode, we bring you voices and perspectives that reflect the diverse knowledge and contributions that CPAs bring to our province. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Uncommon Sense. I'm Jessica DeGroot with the CPA Education Foundation. Our guest today is a Calgary-based CPA who has broken the mold when it comes to stereotypical concepts of what a chartered professional accountant is. Sarah Huber, CPA, currently serves as cost controller, financial planning and analysis with WestJet. A 2016 graduate of Calgary's Mount Royal University, Sarah worked in public practice while earning her CPA designation and her graduate certification in accounting with digital analytics, and then joined WestJet in 2021, where she now manages the finances within the enterprise department. As impressive as that career path is, it doesn't begin to tell Sarah's story. In addition to being a successful CPA, Sarah has also made her lifelong interest in the arts into an important part of her adult life. She is a former musician, an accomplished dancer, and an active volunteer in Calgary's arts community. From spending some time as a cheerleader for the Calgary Stampeders and Calgary Roughnecks, to serving as treasurer of the Calgary's Performing Arts Festival, Sarah has proven that having the mind of a chartered professional accountant is definitely not incompatible with having a passion for the arts. I'm so glad that Sarah is here today to talk about how she blends both of those worlds into her life and how she benefits personally and professionally from her commitment to Calgary's arts community. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Jessica. It's nice to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us. So as you know, I'm going to open our conversation by asking you to share a piece of uncommon sense. This is a piece of advice or words of wisdom that has meant something to you at some point in your life.
Yes, thank you. So it's not maybe the most uncommon piece of advice, but something that has definitely kind of propelled me throughout my education as well as my career is just why not, or what's the worst that can happen? So I just firmly believe that a lot of what I've been able to accomplish and where I've kind of landed myself was just due to not doubting myself and that mindset of, you can't win if you don't even enter the race. So just why not kind of try?
Yeah, that's really great advice. So to dive into the conversation, I want to talk a little bit now about your background and your journey to becoming a CPA. I know that you grew up with a strong interest in the arts and were at one time a competitive dancer. How does a young person with those types of interests find her way into the accounting profession?
Yeah, growing up, it's always been a bit of a paradox. You wouldn't always think that dancing or cheerleading kind of leads you into spreadsheets and accounting, but I do think that growing up throughout my entire life, really, as a competitive dancer, as you noted, I was kind of always, on a stage and had some criticism with adjudicators and stuff like that. So there was always kind of that regiment and rules, et cetera. And then within dance, it's also a little bit of a puzzle where you're putting moves together to make a routine. And I do think accounting is kind of similar, where there's a lot of puzzle pieces that you're putting those debits and credits in order, those kinds of things. And further, that's kind of led to me wanting to kind of put those pieces together for other companies as well. Mm-hmm. And then further, I also think there's a lot of passion between the arts and kind of business. And I've liked that relationship and how it's not always about the profit or the bottom line. And I always find that passion kind of bleeds into the employees or the team members as well. And it's a really great environment to work in.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people also assume that CPAs or accountants in general maybe aren't really creative people. And so I would think that having that creativity for you is probably a real asset for you within your professional career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a big aspect of accounting, and especially in my role now, where you have to problem solve and there's not always a direct answer. So that creativity definitely comes into play.
Mm-hmm. What was it like being a competitive dancer as a young person? Was it enjoyable, challenging, rewarding, or maybe a little bit of everything?
Yeah, definitely a little bit of all of the above. I wouldn't have done it for as long as I have if I didn't enjoy it for sure, but it was always pretty mentally challenging. Like I said, there was a number of routines that I would be kind of memorizing on top of either like pre-secondary or post-secondary school. Also, a lot of prioritization went into that. I was kind of embedded since a young kid of kind of full-time school. After work, I had a ton of activities, dance, eating at the studio, stuff like that. And that progressed into university and my full-time career as well, where I would do something 9 to 5 and then have a whole other life kind of outside of that as well.
Mm-hmm. You kind of get used to having a lot going on.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience as a cheerleader for the Stampeders? That's very cool. How did that opportunity come about for you? Was it a little bit nerve-wracking to perform all of these routines in front of 20,000 people or more?
Yeah, so I actually started with the Calgary Roughnecks lacrosse team, so the dance team for that in 2012 first. And it was right when I moved to Calgary. I was going to Mount Royal University. And again, growing up dancing, I was kind of looking for that opportunity to continue to do so. And I had found myself actually at a Stampeders game watching those cheerleaders. The Roughnecks audition was the next day. So I kind of just, like I said at the beginning of the episode, I said, why not? And what's the worst that can happen? So kind of put myself in that audition. I'm originally from a pretty small town, so I wasn't really sure what to expect from a city audition, but it obviously worked out. And then I went on to join the Stampeders in 2014 and then did a couple years with that team and then retired from the Roughnecks in 2019. So quite a long career with both of those.
That's wonderful. Speaking of creativity and, being interested in the arts, do you think that was something that you were more born with, or was it something that was nurtured in you by your family and friends?
If you would ask my parents, they would say I was always performing and I was always trying to find a stage wherever I could. So I do think I was a little bit kind of attuned to it right from the beginning, but I've been really lucky that my family, friends, and, those educators and mentors throughout my life have always really encouraged me and really accepted that I kind of do both of these things. Even going through public practice and stuff in my CPA career, it was kind of my identifier at the firm, if you will, that, she's the cheerleading accountant. So it's always been really, accepted and really great.
I love that. It kind of sets you apart. So you mentioned that you always kind of had a lot going on between pre or post-secondary and your dancing career and everything. So you're going to university and then working to become a CPA after graduation. Obviously, that's a demanding and even stressful pursuit. Were you able to fall back on your interest in the arts as a way to bring some balance and stress relief to your life during that period?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really important to me to kind of show up at practice with people who are not fellow accountants like myself. And it was an ability to kind of leave whether it's the CPA studies or my work or anything at the door and just say, okay, I'm here to dance with people who don't care about any of those things. And it is obviously a physical workout too. So you get those endorphins moving and get a little bit of a sweat on and stuff like that. So it was a really full cycle kind of balancing act with that.
Awesome. And you recently completed a term of service on the board of the Calgary Performing Arts Festival, during which you served as board treasurer. So before we talk about that experience, can you first tell us what the Calgary Performing Arts Festival is and why you chose to join that board?
Yeah, so the Calgary Performing Arts Festival actually began in 1931. So we're about to celebrate the centennial in 2031. So stay tuned for that as we kind of get ready to celebrate. But it was formerly known as the Kiwanis Music Festival and has a really robust legacy within Calgary and Central Alberta. Essentially, youth from that area can kind of come in and do a 3-week adjudicated performance, whether it's spoken word, strings, piano, guitar, all kinds of kind of musical instruments, musical theater as well. And they get that direct feedback, a chance to be on the stage in front of peers, and then they get on to provincials, nationals, and other endeavors from there. In terms of why I decided to join, I did recognize that it was something that I wanted to pursue at some point in my career in terms of joining a board. And originally I was a little hesitant because I am earlier in my career. So it was, again, that mindset of why not try now? Maybe it'll be valuable. I'm young, but that doesn't need to stop me. So I just kind of wanted that development and that experience. And again, giving back to a very established organization felt like a good way to kind of tip my toes into that.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I love that. I think that's such an important lesson and just because you're young doesn't mean that you don't have value or anything important to bring to the table, right? I think sometimes it's very much the opposite.
Absolutely.
So based on your time with the festival, what do you see as the state of the local arts sector in Calgary these days? Are there any strengths in particular, and what are some of the current challenges?
Yeah, so I'd say that the state of the art sector in Calgary is dynamic in that it's in a bit of a period of change. So we're seeing a lot more focus on community connection. So how do the arts kind of facilitate that balanced lifestyle with wellness, encouraging culture, bringing people together, stuff like that. And I think we can all agree that in these days, it's better than ever to kind of be brought together and find that unity and that kind of common goal. So there's definitely a lot more leaning on that. We are also in Calgary specifically going through quite a big infrastructure development. So they're revamping or revitalizing the Calgary Arts District downtown. So there's a lot of energy and excitement kind of coming behind that in Calgary, which we're excited to kind of be a part of. On the opposite side, some of the challenges that we're seeing are a lot of funding challenges. So times are tough for everyone. There's big U.S. economic kind of pressures. There's recessionary pressures, just day-to-day, anything like that. So it's hard to kind of give back to those nonprofits and those arts programs, or sometimes it's feeling like it's maybe a more elitist kind of program. So the kids who are in piano kind of programs, or maybe it's dance or hockey, they are kind of seen as a more economic forward endeavor. So it's kind of hard to justify your donations in that way. So we're having a hard time kind of saying like, okay, here is the value and why you should give back to the arts. Another kind of piece within there as well is the volunteerism. So I think we have some discussion coming up that I'm excited to have with volunteerism in general, but we are seeing a decline on getting people passionate, willing to put their time in, show up, and be accountable to these organizations. And the last thing I'll touch on is post-pandemic, there's obviously a huge shift in technology and being able to compete globally as well. So that's a big piece to nonprofits and local arts organizations is, when everything's digital and making a really global impact, how do you have a more local chapter and a more local passion as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all really great points. And especially the economic side of things, I think when it does come down to challenging times, a lot of people they don't see the arts as maybe being as important. Like you mentioned, they would maybe rather donate to, healthcare or, like the Stollery, for example, or the Calgary Children's Hospital, like something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Which are also very important.
Yes,
but yeah, it's just a challenge
absolutely.
that you have when you're selling a case.
Yeah. So transitioning, I guess, a little bit to talking about volunteerism, I hear from numerous CPAs that they, through volunteering, have an opportunity to grow their skill set. And being the treasurer of an arts organization is a great way to combine your skills as a CPA with your dedication to the arts. So how did your CPA skills specifically help you during your time on the board?
Yeah, so I think first it was just the more qualitative skill set. So I remember my capstone one, I believe it was, where you're kind of put in front of a board and you have to, act professional and field questions and kind of have that back and forth. And I think that is something, again, being a little bit earlier in my career, stepping into a board, I was well equipped to kind of be able to sit with counterparts who had maybe double the amount of experience in the industry as I did and still feel comfortable sitting there. Obviously, there was a ton of technical skills I got from the CPA program as well. So the CPA way of breaking problems down and trying to understand, like, okay, first define what this problem is before you actually break it apart and solve the problem. A lot of the time, especially in the arts, you're communicating with people who don't have a financial background. So it's really important to kind of be able to translate and bridge those gaps and fully understand your concepts so that the other person that you're communicating with can also come along on that journey with you. So you're not just, speaking numbers at them and they're not really following.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see how that could definitely be important and perhaps challenging at some times. On the flip side, have your experiences as an arts volunteer and participant helped you to be a better CPA in some ways? And are there any lessons that you have learned from the arts that you can apply to your career as an accountant?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the arts blending into my CPA career, there's definitely that underlying passion and purpose that it's not you're not always going to find it, but I think it's an important undertone to kind of guide your career of, is this valuable to me? Is this something that matters to me and that I feel good about doing? So that's definitely come up a number of times is the why. I do also think the arts and any nonprofit really gives you a lot of empathy. So you get to work with a variety of people at a variety of life cycles and life stages. And so I think that's always a good thing to have in a business environment, because especially as you get further and further in your career, you're going to continue to have those teams change and those people you work with change. So you always want to have that awareness. And again, I think a lot of professionalism is involved in the accounting and the CPA career in general. So I think having that really as like an undertone of my whole life really has been really valuable.
Mm-hmm. And I think you kind of touched on this next question, but on a more general level, what does an interest in the arts give a person, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think it's tied to wellness and a little bit of a different muscle to flex, if you will. So sometimes, again, we're thinking so much about profits or bottom lines and accuracy and stuff like that. But I think once you take a shift and think about the purpose or the passion behind an entity, it can kind of, give you a different way of looking at your work and a different way of motivating yourself. I also think there's a big mental health kind of piece to this where personally, if you're going out to see shows, you're listening to art, you're watching art, that's something that, technology and those things can't really replace. We're all on our phones a lot, but I do think there's something to be said about physically being around other people, enjoying the arts, enjoying the culture around you, and creating that community either locally or at a broader scale.
Yeah, that is a really great point. Just experiencing something a little bit different than what we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. Something that AI can't replicate. So
Yeah. And I understand that you've had some other volunteer experiences in addition to your work with the Calgary Performing Arts Festival. Can you do a little recap of those experiences and what you've gained from serving as a volunteer in your community?
Yeah, definitely. So I went to school in Calgary at Mount Royal University and was right away joining a nonprofit organization there called Enactus. So it's a worldwide organization where students give back in a variety of kind of socio and economic ways to their community. So I did that throughout my entire undergrad. While I was an undergrad, I was still cheerleading, and we actually had a requirement to do a minimum of 20 volunteer hours every season with the cheer teams. So one of our main organizations we helped with was Brown Bagging for Calgary's Kids. So we would go and serve lunches for local Calgary students and kind of hand them out. We would also kind of participate in Hike for Hospices, a lot of community events, anything that we were kind of needed for. Professionally, I also kind of continue my volunteerism. My time in public practice, they had a lot of opportunity to provide meal services to like our drop-in centers, stuff like that. And then lastly, at WestJet, I've been a social committee member where we have a number of fundraising initiatives to give back to our community. So I don't necessarily look for them, but I do find myself landing in a lot of these kind of social giving, kind of giving back opportunities. So yeah, it's kind of, again, followed me throughout my career.
Yeah, definitely sounds like you've been very involved and keeping busy for sure. Do you have any advice for somebody who is maybe wanting to get more involved, but maybe they're a little bit nervous, like maybe they feel like you did, like they don't have enough experience in a certain area or they're not quite sure how to start? What could they do?
Yeah, I think professionally, I would seek out your social committees and things like that. That's a really great opportunity to kind of elaborate on the wellness or social footprint of your organization. So that's a really great way to start. And in terms of board positions or other nonprofit volunteerisms, LinkedIn is a really great resource where there's always kind of volunteer postings. And I just think the biggest thing you can do is understand what you're passionate about and make sure that the position is truly what you're passionate about, not something that you just think will look good or something that you think sounds like other people would find it valuable. It really needs to come from a place that's passionate for you so that it can be something that you want to put your energy into going forward.
Yeah, that's great advice. And what do you think are the keys to being an effective volunteer volunteer or a volunteer board member? What are the most important things there?
Yeah, I think it is making sure you have that interest because it is a time and an energy commitment. You don't want to kind of show up to those volunteer meetings and not feeling like you've contributed or pulled the weight that you are kind of signed up to do so. You also, I think, have to keep an open mind. So a lot of the time you'll walk into these situations or there's a different way of running the business because it is sometimes maybe more culturally based or it's a entrepreneurial endeavor or something like that. You just have to come in and listen first, not think that you know all the answers. Try to understand what are the challenges and then as best you can relate it to what you do have in your pocket and understand too that you're not going to know everything. And I don't think everyone expects you to know everything. So you need to tap into your network and know when to ask questions as well.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And this has been a really great discussion, Sarah. I want to end with one last question for you. It's a little bit of a two-parter. Are you still able to find time for some dancing these days? And what is your go-to song to listen to?
Yeah, that's a great two-parter. So the first, yes, I'm definitely trying to keep dancing. I do some drop-in adult classes, and actually the Stampeders alumni are getting together for our upcoming October game. We're doing a Pink Power routine. So me and a bunch of previous Outriders, the cheerleaders, are going to be dancing there. And in terms of my favorite song, I know Taylor Swift's probably on the top of most people's minds, but I'm a big Justin Bieber fan, so I've been pretty hooked on his latest album.
Oh, I love that. Thanks so much for being here today, Sarah. One of the main goals of our podcast is to demonstrate that CPAs aren't just about numbers and spreadsheets. And I think you've given us a really vivid glimpse into how multifaceted the life of a busy professional can be. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks again so much.
The Uncommon Sense podcast is presented by the CPA Education Foundation and funded by the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center. The Knowledge Center was created through a generous donation by the late Brian Heshe. Brian was a distinguished Albertan, business leader, CPA, educator, and community builder. His generosity and commitment to education underpinned his good works across Alberta throughout his lifetime. The opinions expressed on Uncommon Sense do not necessarily reflect the views of the CPA Education Foundation. We would like to acknowledge that CPA Education Foundation offices are situated on the traditional Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories and Métis Nation homeland. The Foundation acknowledges that we reside on traditional and ancestral territories of many Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Their histories and culture influence our community to this day. The Foundation is committed to helping build a province where Indigenous people and their voices and experiences are heard, valued, respected, and celebrated. Technical and recording services for this podcast provided by Wolf Willow Studios in Edmonton. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. If you have any comments about the podcast, write to us at cpaef@cpaalberta.ca. To learn more about the CPA Education Foundation and the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center, visit cpaalberta.ca/foundation.